Hey Shim, this is Stay Frosty. Well, you may know me as Michael G. Scott. Here I am on my Fire Mage. That's sign sitting right there. Anyways, um, I am pretty much just self-buffed. I did eat a cookie, so it's increasing my intellect a little bit. And I do have Mark of the Wild on, but I definitely don't have all the raid buffs. So this should give you a rough estimate of the type of DPS you can pull if you do the correct rotation. And keep in mind that I will be making another video on raid bosses. This is just on a target dummy. So my DPS will be a little bit lower than in raids. But this should give you a good baseline when you're practicing on dummies. So first thing to consider is my stats. If you look, I've got a hit rating of 17.04%. That was pretty much spoon-fed to me by an add-on I have called Reforginator, which is right here. You can download this if you want, but basically you click on it and you can select your spec. You can select, usually I click consider reforging anything and then reforge for rating because we are rating. And it doesn't have any suggestions for me right now because I've used it to help reforge everything. But you should definitely consider getting this because it does have a lot of suggestions and it prioritizes certain stats. So for hit chance, it first tries to get your hit chance above 17%, but as close to 17% as possible so you're not wasting extra hit rating. Then it looks at haste, and it's set for fire mages to get you to about 1550 haste rating, which when you're in a raid situation will get you above the 25% haste mark. So you'll want to follow that reforging strategy. But even if you don't get Reforginator, a good thing to do is to try to get your haste at about 16% completely unbuffed. So without Mark of the Wild or Kings or anything like that, get it to 16%. But Reforginator will do all that for you if you get it. So you notice my crit is about 27% without many raid buffs. My mastery is stacked as low as possible, basically. So if you notice, I reforge away from mastery when I can, and I try to get to that 16% haste buff. The only reason I got more haste now is because Sion's in my party, and I get the Moonkin aura, which gives me an extra 5%. But normally I'm about at 16%. So here's the spec. Here's my talent tree I have. I've reviewed your talent tree, and I think we've got basically the same thing. The only thing I would recommend, if you haven't done it, is change your improved Scorch to talents over to Arcane Concentration. They're both mana savers in a pinch, but I'll tell you what, Arcane Concentration over the course of a long fight tends to give you back a little bit more mana than improved Scorch will, because nowadays we don't really cast Scorch as much as we used to. So that's not really that important. You can still cast Scorch on the run though, so all these other talents are really useful, and you already have Cauterize, so that's good. So the spec is pretty self-explanatory. As far as glyphs go, you want to have Glyph of Pyroblast to give you an extra 5% crit chance on that. You want to have Glyph of Fireball to give you an extra 5% crit on Fireball. And finally, you want to have Glyph of Molten Armor, extra 2% crit chance for Molten Armor. Now, Dragon's Breath is just something, it's kind of a space filler, but I do use Dragon's Breath a decent amount on AoE pulls. So reducing the cooldown by 3 seconds can help in situations, but for the most part, you definitely want to have Glyph of Evocation to heal yourself when you evocate, and Glyph of Polymorph. It's just good if we ever need a CC. The minor glyphs, you can decide what you want to do. So now that we've gone over all the basics of Fire Mage stats, glyphs, and specs, and keep in mind when you reforge for 16% haste, after you hit that 16% haste and you have that 17% hit chance, every other bit of stat wants to go into crit. Crit is our next most powerful stat, and we love it because it gives us the hot streak procs, which are the instant cast pyroblasts. Now let's just take a look real quick at some of my macros I've made to help me out with fire spec. Not all these are fire spec, some of these are for my PvP spec, but some of the important ones are cooldowns, you can have a cooldowns macro if you want. I actually wouldn't recommend this. I have it popping mirror images, time warp, icy veins if I'm in frost spec, and lifeblood because I'm a herbalist. But honestly, I wouldn't recommend that because a lot of times I like to stagger my cooldowns a little bit, so don't worry about that too much. Um, let's see. This is a nice one to have. You can you can screen capture this if you want to copy it, but basically just if I have a focus or a target, it wants to interrupt when I cast counterspell. It wants to interrupt my focus first, whoever I have on focus, or if I don't have a focus, then it interrupts whoever my target is. That's a good PvP one, but it's also great for trash pulls or anytime we want to interrupt something. That's all self-explanatory. Ice is one I made. It basically casts ice block, and then when you hit it again, it cancels ice block. So it's really great if you cauterize. You can ice block real quick and cancel it really quick to remove that cauterized debuff without really losing a lot of time for a lot of time while you're ice blocked. So the last one that I would really recommend having for sure is dash stop casting, dash cast pyroblast. So basically the idea is whenever you get a hot streak proc, you really want to stop casting whatever you're casting at the time and cast your pyroblast as quick as possible. And I'll go into more of the reasoning behind that when I show you as I'm DPSing, but basically this will stop casting whatever you're in the middle of, even Scorch on the move or whatever, and cast pyroblast, and that's going to help you maximize your DPS. So I would definitely recommend that. Okay, so here I am on this 85 dummy. Notice I could be on the raid dummies, but since I'm at 17% hit chance, I know I'm not going to miss on the raid dummies, so I might as well do it on this one just so you single target, because unfortunately when you do it on the raid dummies, some of the splash damage from Living Bomb gets on the other dummies, and then you can't really trust that DPS too much. So self-buffed with obviously Molten Armor and Arcane Brilliance, and I got a little bit of food. So the way I typically open up on a single target is I start off by casting Scorch, which I can be casting while moving. That's going to apply, as you can see here, that's going to apply the critical mass debuff, increasing critical chance, strike chance by 5% any spellcasters. Now, if there is a warlock in the group, technically they can apply that too, but a lot of times, they don't, or you just want to make sure that you get that off pretty quick on any long-term fight. So that lasts for, like 30 seconds almost, so I think it actually does last for 30 seconds, yeah, so that's one that you really shouldn't ever have to reapply as long as you're getting critical strikes, because also all your pyroblasts apply that debuff as well. So I hit this guy with the pyroblast and my critical mass resets. So every time you get a hot streak proc, one of those instant cast pyroblasts, that critical mass will reset. So that should be fine as long as you reapply it once at the beginning of every fight. So the way I like to open up is I like to open up by casting a Scorch straight into a Living Bomb. So now I got the critical mass debuff and Living Bomb on the target. That's going to be ticking. Now after I do that, so let's say I'm starting the fight over right now. So I start by casting Scorch to Living Bomb, and I immediately cast Flame Orb because that's off cooldown. Now what I'll want to do now is start going into my filler spell, which is Fireball, as you notice I'm casting right now. So I cast until Living Bomb needs to be refreshed, and I got a hot streak proc, so I cast that. Now keep in mind that, like I said earlier, whenever you get a hot streak proc, you're going to want to cancel whatever spell you're in the middle of casting right then and there, and go ahead and cast your Pyroblast proc, because that's going to be one of your biggest hot streak is one of your biggest increases to DPS, and it turns out that no matter what, getting that off is a DPS gain than finishing to cast whatever spell you're on at the time. Okay, so this is basically the rotation. Just refresh Living Bomb whenever it's off cooldown. One thing I was told though, and I have to agree with, is while Living Bomb is powerful, you never